Well, here we have a car that's admittedly one of my guilty pleasures. This is a 1958 Lincoln Continental Mark III, sitting next to a Continental Mark II to its right, your left. This car was introduced new in 1958 and ran through the 1960 model year, and it just has wild styling with these canted headlights and big scalloped fenders. And I know a number of my friends who are designers hate this car, but I love the way it looks. And it's an enormous vehicle. It's a 131-inch wheelbase. I believe it's about 234 inches long, so about 6 inches shy of 20 feet long. It's not the longest car ever made. That goes to the 1973 Chrysler Imperial. That's the longest production sedan. Well, this was close. You can see, look at the beautiful detailing on the interior here, including power wing windows. And that's the lever to adjust the outside rear view mirror. But an enormous car, to me, just beautifully proportioned. I love how the deck lid is kind of concave shaped in the back and the three taillights. And there's also a very clever way to discover if one of these cars has a positraction locking rear end or not. You can see right in the middle. If it is so equipped, it has this little logo that says directed power differential right in the middle. If the car does not have that optional feature, that is just a blank plate. But this is the Continental Mark III, as I mentioned. And Lincoln, for whatever reason, named this the Mark III in 1958. They had the Mark IV in 1959 and the Mark V in the 1960. Now, you may be saying, well, I thought that the Mark III came out in 69, the Mark IV in 72, and the Mark V in 1977. And you'd be correct. Lincoln somehow just forgot about these marks and restarted the numbering scheme for those vehicles. But this is a Mark III. And 1958 was a really special year for this. This car is powered by a 430 cubic inch MEL Mercury Edsel Lincoln V8 underhood. Made 375 horsepower, had a 4-barrel carburetor. In 1959, was detuned a bit down to 350 horsepower, and then in 1960 it was really detuned down to 315 horsepower. Same 430 cubic inch engine. But Robert McNamara, who worked for Ford at the time, later the U.S. Secretary of Defense, hated 4-barrel carburetors and thought they were excessive. And this 430 cubic inch engine had a 2-barrel carburetor on that 1960 Mark V. But in any case, a beautiful and distinctive car. This does have 15-inch wheels. Those are not the correct wheel covers for it. But in 1959, they went to 14-inch wheels so they could put bigger white walls on it. They had to redesign the drum brake system as well, because with the 14-inch wheels, the drums, if they had just simply downsized them, couldn't stop the car adequately. So these big, fat, wide drums on the 59s to try to stop this vehicle. I mean, it's a super heavy car. These weighed, around 4,800 pounds in the non-convertible versions, and the convertibles weighed about 5,100 pounds, I believe. So extremely heavy, sturdy vehicle. And interestingly, this car is unibody. It's not body on frame. It is a unibody vehicle, and Lincoln did that for these vehicles introduced in the 1958 model year. And that continued all the way through the Continentals in the late 1960s. Those were also unibody. And why Lincoln elected to make these huge vehicles unibody, I don't know, to be honest. Certainly has a lot of challenges from an engineering standpoint, but they did. And of course, Chrysler made their Imperials unibody starting in the late 1960s and continuing on through that 1973 Imperial that I mentioned, which was the longest production sedan ever made. Let's take a look at the interior on these. Super unique, there's that word again, interior. But it really is. And it's quite stunning. The 58s have this really nice wheel as well. I hesitate to call it a 3-spoke style. It's really a 4-spoke, but in the 3-spoke style with the horn ring there. And you can see the gauge pod. This one, they almost always have a split in the glass. That is glass at the 55 mile an hour line. You can see nice leather interior here. This one's been redone. But overall, really luxurious pattern. This up front is the Autotronic eye for automatic headlamp dimming. And, as I was mentioning, those do have a glass-faced instrument panel. Often they split, for whatever reason, right at the 55 mile per hour line. And the HVAC controls on that car are particularly interesting. There's one knob that controls all of the HVAC, and that dial on the left switches and rotates around from vent to air conditioning to heating. And you just rotate, you see the little index pointer there in that left gauge. You rotate it around to the different modes, and then you pull the lever out for blower fan speed. So the entire HVAC system is operated through that one control. And again, that Autotronic eye that I was mentioning before. You could get many options on this car, and it did have a base price. On most of these, it was around $7,000, $6,500 to $7,000, depending upon the model. But they did come with power seats, the power windows, as you saw there, including the power vent windows. You could get the automatic headlamp dimming, a great air conditioning system as well. And these cars really do ride quite nicely. I've driven, I think, 3 of them. And I will say the 58 in particular is amazingly fast for how big this car is. I believe the magazines tested this car back in 1957, 58. And amazingly, this enormous car that's almost 20 feet long would go 0 to 60 in about 7.8 seconds, or about 8 seconds flat. That is really, really moving for these. Just great detailing, again, on the interior that you can see. One other little tidbit about these is that on the shift indicator, you have to make sure that you shift into the D1 position if you want the car to start out in first gear, versus the D2 position. Otherwise, it's going to start out in second gear and it won't feel as peppy. These did have the Ford Cruise-O-Matic transmission, good bulletproof transmission, and certainly the MEL engine is also similarly bulletproof. I mean, the thing is a boat anchor physically of a motor in terms of its size. I think one of the physically largest and heaviest V8 engines that was made by any domestic company, certainly. And while, as I admitted, I really enjoy this vehicle, I have to admit it wasn't a good seller. Whether you pick the convertible or the hardtop coupe or the sedan, the 4-door on these, they really only sold a couple thousand units a year. The hardtop sedans did get about 5,000-6,000 units in terms of sales at some point, but they really were not good sellers. And in 1960, they even cheapened it out a little bit underneath. 58s and 9s have full coil suspension. The 60s have rear leaf springs, which also the 61 Continental would employ as well. Cheap, cheap, cheap. Fun for the finance people. Thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed this brief feature. Until next time, take care. Thanks for watching this video on the 58 Continental Mark III. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit super thanks as well. Until next time, check out the video thumbnails at bottom left and right for some suggestions for you, and thanks again for watching.